Hello, good morning and welcome to another exciting moment where we talk about business. It is Business 360 and my name is Blyden Uken. In Business 360 today we'll look at some of the biggest talking points in the world of business. We'll also look at a recent strike by the Actors Union SAG-AFTRA. We'll talk about the commodity markets, the direction of the different stocks amid concerns and the war. The war between Israel and Hamas, it would be the mainstay of the conversation looking at recent New Economic Forum in Singapore. Let's begin with the Actors Union strike. Actors Union SAG-AFTRA says it has agreed a tentative deal with Hollywood studios to end a month-long strike. SAG-AFTRA reached agreement with the Alliance of Motion Picture and TV Producers in an unanimous vote, ending the 118-day shutdown. The impasse, combined with a separate writer's strike, has delayed the releases of numerous big upcoming films, including 2 Avengers titles. According to the actors have been calling for better pay and safeguards on the use of AI. They said the strike officially ends today, with more details released following a meeting on Friday. They were pleased to have reached a tentative agreement, looking forward to the industry resuming the work of telling great stories. There's been a conversation regarding the strike. Saudi Arabia's Minister of Investment Khalid Al-Falih says talks towards the normalization of ties with Israel remain on the table, but have always been contingent on a pathway to a peaceful resolution of the Palestinian question. The Minister of Investment spoke about the war between Israel and Hamas and U.S.-China relations. He spoke at a panel at the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Singapore. Let's find out more.
It is unfortunate that we are meeting at a time of heightened crisis around the world, certainly in the Middle East, where I come from. We're troubled and we're pained by the suffering at the human level in Gaza, as much as we're pained by the losses of life on the other side on October 7. But through this crisis, through the crisis in Europe, through multiple other hotspots around the world, we see through them, hopefully, towards a better future. And I think we in Saudi Arabia are focusing on our long-term objectives of creating prosperity and creating an example in the Middle East and the broader areas around us, where focus on the betterment of people is a much better alternative than ideological tension and conflicts with one's neighbors. Going back to the bigger question on the China-US relationships, I agree with you, Stephanie, that pragmatism is surfacing. We heard it from the Vice President today. A call for collaboration and coexistence between.
Meanwhile, Singapore's Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan shares his view on the geopolitical tension around the globe. He also spoke at the Economic Forum in Singapore regarding the war.
Is whether you're going to get a regional conflagration. And I know you put him on the spot with the question about oil price. Well, the real issue is that if you have a regional conflagration, and in particular, Iran gets into the act, I think you can easily imagine the impact of this on global oil supplies and therefore the price, and the impact on all the rest of us. There's one more sub-factor which is worth remembering. The difference between 1973 and 2023 is that the United States is now an energy exporter, net, which is very different from the situation in 1973. And you need to pass the implications of that. Now, going beyond the Middle East, you will now have a world stage, hot war in Europe, war in the Middle East with possible conflagration, and you've got tripwires in the Pacific, Taiwan and South China Sea. And if you tot up on a ledger the countries aligned on either side of these conflicts or tripwires all around the world, I'm very uncomfortable that it's the same cast of characters on either side of those lines. And therefore, I don't want to be excessively alarmist, but the last time that happened globally was the First World War. So this is a moment of danger. I wouldn't say it's highly likely. It's less likely, but the probability is not zero, and it's got profound impact.
Still at the forum, a Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong cited the enormous human tragedy of the Israel-Hamas war, as saying there's no alternative to a two-state solution to ensure peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Lee spoke at the New Economy Forum in Singapore. Let's find out more.
But what has happened since then in Gaza, as a consequence of Israeli operations, is an enormous human tragedy. The numbers keep on ticking up every day, but it's many times as many as what happened on the 7th of October. Again, women, children, and many innocent civilians. The destruction is on an enormous scale. And everybody around the world looks at this and in despair and say, surely this has to stop. Whatever the rights and wrongs, you must pay attention to the humanitarian considerations. And we have tried to express that in our statements. I think it's important that we recognize both the evil things which are done in the first attack on the 7th of October, and also the very, very tragic things which are happening in Gaza now. And we have to exhort the Israelis and everybody else to abide by international norms and to have a consideration for innocent civilians.
Do you think there is a long-term solution? You've always been a supporter of the two-state solution. Is that still possible?
There is no alternative to that. It's very difficult. It looks way over the horizon. But the alternative to a two-state solution is a one-state solution. And that means one side or the other has to be squeezed out.
Meanwhile, top diplomats from the Group of 7 leading industrial democracies announced a unified stance on the Israel-Hamas war on Wednesday after an intensive meeting in Tokyo, condemning Hamas and supporting Israel's rights to self-defense and calling for humanitarian forces to speed aid to desperate civilians in the Gaza Strip. Let's find out details from the Tokyo meeting.
Our staunch support for Israel's right and obligation to defend itself and seek to ensure the attacks of October 7th can never happen again in accordance with international humanitarian law. We had in-depth discussions about the steps that we are taking to address urgent needs on the ground. We all agreed that humanitarian pauses would advance key objectives: to protect Palestinian civilians, to increase the sustained flow of humanitarian assistance, to allow our citizens and foreign nationals to exit, and to facilitate the release of hostages. Gaza cannot.
In Africa, the Africa Development Bank has announced the launch of a special agro-industrial processing zones alliance, a groundbreaking project aimed at mobilizing at least $2 billion in financing and investment commitment from its members and partners over the next 5 years. President of the African Development Bank, Femi Adesina, says the project is a significant step towards making Africa a player in the global food and agricultural value chain. A special agro-industrial processing zones alliance was launched at the ongoing Africa Investment Forum by a group of funding partners, including Afrexim Bank, Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the Islamic Development Bank. still in Africa. Johan Rupert, the richest person in South Africa, saw a substantial decline in his net worth in 2023 so far, totaling $1.8 billion. Despite Richmond's borrowed and the robust quarterly sales, its share price significantly fell on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. In the last 6 months, there has been a significant 26% decrease in Richmond shares. Based on information from Forbes, Johan Rupert's net worth has estimated to be $11.1 billion at the beginning of the year. His net worth has dropped significantly to $9.3 billion. African telecommunication giant MTN is considering exiting 3 markets on the continent. The Pan-African mobile operator, which currently has a presence in 19 countries on the continent and the Middle East, said that discussions are also ongoing regarding the potential orderly exit of its operation in Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, and Liberia. These changes will reduce the tally of 5, or rather the tally to 5 operating countries in the group's West and Central Africa WECA segment of its portfolio. The 3 countries are not major contributors to MTN's revenue, accounting for only 1.6% of its total revenue in 2022. Meanwhile, its financial reports show that it's facing numerous challenges across the West and Central Africa region. CEO Ralph Mupita pointed to signs of inflation and currency devaluation across several markets. Now in Nigeria. In addition to the substantial price shocks impacting commodity and energy prices globally, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has reported that the ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis has hurt Nigeria's crude oil exports to international markets. According to a statement released by the company, the war has led to a dip in demand from the once dependable Asian market at the onset of hostility in the Eastern Bloc and has triggered a situation where India, a primary destination for Nigeria's grades, increased its appetite for discounted Russian barrels to the detriment of some Nigerian volumes. Meanwhile, the executive director of Crude and Condensate, NMPC Trading Limited, Mariamu Idris, said at the Argus European Crude Conference in London that Nigerian crude exports to Europe have risen, aiming to bridge the supply void created by the ban on Russian crude. 6 months before the conflict, 678,000 barrels per day of Nigerian crude were destined for Europe. In contrast, 6 months into the war, this figure increased to 700,000 barrels per day, and the current year has seen exports reach 730,000 barrels per day. Meanwhile, the Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC, has warned Nigerians to disregard trending social media messages on free registration of business names and companies. The Commission issued the warning in a statement on its X handle, stressing that such a message could not have emanated from them. Meanwhile, the Registrar General of the Commission, Hosseini Magaji, vowed to remove encumbrances to staff performance when he visited the CSE Lagos office in continuation of his interactive meeting with staff. Now to CBN report. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has said that every banknote remains legal tender and should not be rejected by anyone. This is as the Apex Bank directed all its branches across the country to continue to issue different denomination of the old and redesigned banknotes in adequate quantities to deposit money banks. This disclosure was contained in a public statement issued by the Director of Corporate Communications of the CBN, Issa Abdul Mumin, on Wednesday in Abuja. The Apex Bank was reacting to reports of cash shortages in major cities across the country. CBN had a few days ago pinned the complaints about shortage of cash across the bank counter and automated teller machine ATP points nationwide on high volume and panic withdrawals by Nigerians. It assured the citizens of the availability of cash to service their economy. We'll go on a quick break. When we return, it would be economic statistics all around the world and indications in it. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is Business 360, and my name is Blyden Okem. Now to global economic statistics, beginning with the Bank of England. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey said policy is going to have to be restrictive for an extended period to see the second half out, which is where policy is going to have to do the work to bring inflation back to 2% as a pushback against market bets on interest rates. And Bailey spoke on Wednesday at the Central Bank of Ireland Financial System Conference. Let's find out more.
There are some pretty common elements across Europe, and I define Europe geographically and not in any other sense, so together, because we've been hit by some pretty common shocks. Obviously, sadly, the Ukrainian war being the biggest one. And so I think we're seeing a fairly common pattern now that the big shocks of last year and a bit before that are now unwinding. So certainly we see in the UK inflation coming down. I mean, it's not come down yet as much as in the euro area, but I expect the next read to be quite a bit lower because we have a particular pattern of energy support measures, which means it adjusts every quarter really, and the next one is the quarterly adjustment, and I expect quite a fall in the next figure because that's, I say, sort of somewhat baked into the annual comparison. However,
in Philippines, a Philippine state quarter GDP growth beats forecast. The Philippine GDP expanded 5.9% year-on-year in the third quarter of 2023, up from a 4.3% growth in the previous period and beating market forecast of a 4.7% rise. It marked the 10th consecutive quarter of yearly expansion, supported by a strong rebound in government spending in the second quarter and a further rise in fixed investments. Also, net trade contributed positively to the GDP as exports grew 2.6%, while imports fell 1.3%. In contrast, a growth slightly eased for household consumption at 5%. On the production side, all major economic sectors showed accelerated upturns, namely agriculture, forestry and fishing, industry and services. For January to September, the GDP growth is at 5.5%, remaining below the government's full-year target of 6% to 7%. Now to the commodity market, looking at the price of oil as oil prices rise but remains under pressure. WTI crude futures rose towards $76 per barrel today, but remain under pressure amid growing demand and uncertainties and easing concerns over potential supply disruption in the Middle East. Oil prices fell more than 2% on Wednesday to the lowest since mid-July amid emerging demand concerns in two of the world's largest oil consumers, China and the United States. A latest data showed that consumer prices in China fell more than expected in October, while producer prices declined for the 13th straight month. Earlier data also showed that Chinese export contracted more than expected last month, and in the U.S., the report said that the total petroleum consumption in the U.S. is expected to decrease by 300,000 barrels per day this year, a reversal from its previous forecast for 100,000 barrels per day. Let's look at the market itself, beginning with the energy market, and afterwards we'll also look at the agricultural commodities and the metals, the energy market. The price of crude oil, the U.S. crude, is standing at $75 per barrel, gaining 0.585 points, a 0.78% increase, while Brent's price is at $80 per barrel. Let's look at the metals, the price of gold, silver and copper, the metal market. Our gold price is downward by 2.92 points this morning, and while that of silver has a slight decline this morning, a negative 0.44%, $22 per ounce is the price of silver. For steel price, it's gained 45 points at 3,864 Chinese yuan per ton. Let's look at the agricultural commodities. The price of soybeans this morning is upward by 4 points, $1,353 per bushel, while wheat price is downward by 5.23 points at $587 per bushel. Palm oil also dropping 26 points this morning, 3,742 Malaysian ringgit per ton. Now to the foreign exchange market. On Wednesday, the Nigerian currency sank against the US dollar in both the official and parallel market, reversing a modest gain experienced last week. The Nigerian naira fell to 874 naira per dollar in official market, experiencing a 0.55% drop. The parallel market's informal exchange rates witnessed the naira drop to 1,130 naira per dollar. Report also shows that a forex turnover at the closing of trade was $223.52 million, a 60.1% rise over the previous day. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Association of Bureau de Change Operators has urged people betting against the naira to be cautious. The president of the organization, Amedu Gwandaba, issued the warning, noting that the Central Bank of Nigeria was planning to punish currency speculators. Let's quickly delve into the market, looking at the prices, the US dollar against the naira, and naira's prices in the parallel markets. Let's begin with the US dollar against the naira. While looking at the perspective of the market this morning, the current price standing for naira against the US dollar is 802 naira, equaling $1, while the euro against the naira is at 833 naira, 839 naira to the euro. A decline at the closure of yesterday's market for the euro against the naira, a minus 1.713 points. The pound's rate against the naira is at 963 naira for 1 pound. The pound dropping at the closure of yesterday's market at a negative 2.8928 points. Now to the parallel market. At the parallel market, prices tend to differ as the naira continues to struggle against the dollar. 1,160 naira equals $1, the buying rate and selling rate 1,105 naira. The pound to naira is standing at 1,335 naira, equaling 1 pound at the buying rate and selling rate 1,290 naira. For the euro to naira, the buying rate states 1,230 naira, equaling €1, and selling rate 1,155 naira. Now quickly, let's look at the state of things regarding the cryptocurrency market this morning. What the price of Bitcoin is this morning. Bitcoin has been moving upward, gaining 1,253 points this morning. $36,844 is the price of one Bitcoin, a 3.53% increment. On a weekly basis, 5.39% increment. Ether also on the positive, gaining 29 points this morning. $1,915 is the price of Ether. And Binance on the positive, 4.9 points gain. And Cardano, Solana, a little here, a little there. And here we draw the curtain on today's edition of Business 360. Thank you for being a part of it. My name is Blyden Ukem.